And it's the balance that must be achieved that is such that the debt financing is sustainable. And the overall objective now is to build a resilient, diversified, and growing economy. Currently, the growth rate of GDP, it is still growing. It is still above population growth. Last year, it was 3.4% overall, which is normally good. But when we look at where we are coming from, we need double that rate of growth in order to lift Nigerians out of poverty in their millions, which is the overall aim of the president and his policies and his administration, and indeed, as the Minister for Budget said, of all those in authority. So, revenue is key. Domestic resource mobilization is key. And the success that has been achieved there has already been mentioned. In 2025, the revenue is up 40%. More importantly, technology, automation, and digitization has been recently implemented in order to give the transparency that will boost the revenue of government from its agencies and the federal government-owned enterprises and their operations. And that is the basis of having debt within sustainable levels, debt servicing within comfortable levels. We are on that path to make debt servicing less burdensome and to grow the economy and to create jobs. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Honorable Minister. That also brings me to a question I will pose to Honorable Minister of Budget and Planning. And this comes from an experience I personally had some 15 years ago. I sat on the Presidential Committee and we were to look at the expenditure profile of the federal government of Nigeria. And what we discovered there relates to what you just shared with us, Honorable Minister. We found that non-oil revenue compared to our recurrent expenditure compared to our non-oil revenue was 150%. And then we said, if Nigeria will get out of this, they will need to adopt a strategy where we grow non-oil revenue over a defined period of time to make it equal to the current expenditure. That way we free oil revenue for capital spending and possibly investment for the future. Now, on the back of that, Honorable Minister of Budget, I've personally had this view that when we get to a point in Nigeria where we don't need to look at the price of crude oil and then the volume of crude oil we produce and export to actually define our budget. Do we have such vision of a time when the national budget will no longer be making reference to oil assumptions?
Just before I go, if I can just comment on what my brother has very aptly captured on this debt debate. And I think the Nigerian Economic Society can help. What is the absorptive capacity of a country with 230 million people who are crying for inclusion, hardworking, mostly hardworking men and women who are looking for inclusion, whose farming population are mostly one crop per season farmers because we don't have enough irrigation, whose fishing communities rely on fresh water body because we need capital to modernize them, who, as we had this morning, despite enormous livestock potential, because of underinvestment, livestock, the animal husband has even remained a source of conflict. We need trillions of dollars to get it, to correct these decades of underinvestment. And let us as Nigerians be clear that the capital markets outside listen to what we say. if we say we don't have the absorptive capacity, some capital providers will take note and be careful. So this is something that we should enrich this debate, because earlier this morning when I spoke, I gave the example of, or even before saying that, a very popular book by W.W. Rostow, Stages of Economic Growth, made the point that in determining how much borrowing or whatever, you have to look at also your stage of development. Because if you are trying to mobilize all your capacity to move as quickly as you can, you need more resources. That is how a country like Japan, which has about half our land mass, half our population, but maybe our debt is 1%, 2% of, not more than 3% of Japanese debt. Why? How is it that they needed that much money? Was it funding wastage policy? No. They are known for good governance. So that means there is an irreducible amount of money, despite all the commendable things, despite the risk we have taken, commendably Mr. President has taken, that we need to marshal and begin to appreciate, so that our educational system, our public support, our public system, led by the Nigerian Economic Society, can help characterize the kind of resources that we need and lay ground for it, rather than when we are talking literally in tongues, we are saying one thing and we don't have foundational support. The same when you look at Spain. Again, less than about half the Nigerian landmass, about 1/4 of Nigeria's population, but with over 2 trillion debt. Why do they need that debt? Because to develop people, you need the resources, especially where you have been underinvesting. So even as we are correcting it, I guess we shouldn't lose this argument. We are not overgeared, we are not overborrowed. In fact, compared to our capacity and compared to these other countries, we are underborrowed or underinvested. So we need to be very, very vigilant, and it will be helpful if the Nigerian Economic Society and the Minister of Budget would be willing to fund a study on the absorptive capacity of the Nigerian economy, so that we can have a guide. And to come back to your question, again, we have to understand recurrent expenditure and stage of development itself, because yes, it may sound as if recurrent capital is always better than the recurrent, but where your recurrent includes salaries of teachers for a country that is struggling to give education to every child, then it's not such, or where we are, that recurrent improve providing your security services in order to secure the country. So the recurrent is not necessary. But even at that, I think Nigeria has done well in terms of the mix. Do I see a day when we will exit reference to oil? Let's even understand the evolution. Being a federation state, being a constitutional federation, historically, there has always been the context setting that will guide both the national, state, and local government budget decision. So it's like a culture that evolved. What are those major indices, major items? At one time in Nigeria's history, maybe many people have forgotten the price of cocoa or price of tin used to feature in the item. So this is an evolutionary pace. As what we are seeing in terms of non-oil revenues becoming more important sources, as significant as oil revenue, I can see a way at the end that maybe even for editing purposes, we may not need to be mentioning crude oil price or even oil price, but they will remain important tools, not just in Nigeria, but globally. If you follow many indices, oil price is one of those major, not because it's the most important, but because it's a significant determinant of other indices.
Thank you so very much, Honorable Minister. I know time now is not our friend. Looking at the dashboard there, we have barely 2 minutes. Okay, all right. So I'll therefore give it to.
Thank you very much indeed, and I thank the Honourable Minister for the context he has said. The reality is that the Nigerian economy has turned from one in which it was closed. You did not have market pricing of petroleum products. You did not have market pricing of foreign exchange, which meant you needed privileged access. The opportunity to grow, to finance, to invest was limited. Since the assumption of office of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the economy has been opened up. The playing field has been leveled. And what does that mean? It means that in terms of the ability to finance economic growth, it is not just what government can bring and what a few people who have privileged access to resources can bring. Now, the investment environment is feasible for small, medium, as well as large-scale Nigerians. Is feasible and attractive for foreigners as well. In the oil sector, $7 billion worth of investments has come in recently. And more importantly, now manufactured exports from Nigeria, from the smallest, from making of hair, from cosmetic products, they go from Nigeria across West Africa and even beyond, because the exchange rate is competitive and the environment is conducive for investors. That is the way we will build a resilient, a diversified, and a balanced economy that is not just depending on oil exports for revenue and for foreign exchange. And so the promise and the opportunity, particularly to the young in Nigeria, is that the economy is very much open and attractive and available for you to seize the opportunity and engage in productive activity that will earn you a good living, grow the economy, create jobs for those coming behind, and lead to a much more prosperous Nigeria. The change that was required has already occurred, and now we just need to stay the course and keep on doing the things that we are doing to make the Nigerian economy strong at all levels. And finally, I will commend to all of us, including the Nigeria Economic Society, a deep examination and understanding of the initiative led by, under the Mr. President's direction, led by the Minister for Budget and Economic Planning, of a world-based grassroots development program that empowers Nigerians in each ward. Nigerians engaged in productive activity, it boosts them with funding and with capacity and with facilities. And that now speaks to a widespread development of the economy, widespread sharing of the benefits of growth. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, dear ministers. I wish we had more time to interrogate the issues much further. But as it were, on behalf of our president and the council, I want to say a very big thank you for the time you made to be here, honorable ministers, and for the views you shared with us. I have quite a number of other questions, but unfortunately we can't take them today. But maybe, Mr. President, sir, I will put it ahead that next year at our conference, we'd like to have a repeat, probably for a longer period. So thank you so very much, honorable ministers.
Okay. Honorable Minister says that I should ask you, how many of you know your wards? Your electoral wards, the name of your wards? Geographical wards, actually. How many of you know your wards? So that's the question to you. So please, council members, can you quickly come to the stage for pictures? While that is going on, let's get the presentation of gifts and awards ready for our honorable minister. And the presentation of will be done by the immediate past president of the NES. All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Honorable ministers, please, the Nigerian Economic Society has some gifts for you and awards. Please, that will be presented by Professor Umu Ahmed Jalingo, the immediate past president of the Nigerian Economic Society. Please, can we get the first award to the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy? Professor Ahmed Jalingo will do the presentation. Thank you very much. The next presentation would be to the Honorable Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Senator Atiku Bagudu, CON. Still done by Professor Ahmed Jalingo, the immediate past president of the Nigerian Economic Society. Thank you very much. Please, can we give our ministers a round of applause? Thank you very much, sir. Please, as they exit, can we just all still remain seated as we continue the program? I'll be calling on Professor Umu Ahmed Jalingo for her, for her quick remarks. So please, can we give a round of applause to Professor Ahmed Jalingo, the immediate past president of the Nigerian Economic Society.
Thank you so very much, Nancy. And protocols observed, even though there are so many empty seats in front. Yes, ideally, I'm supposed to chair presidential presentation this morning or around afternoon time, around 12. However, some people put a lot of pressure on my president because he is a listening president. He called me to give me the constitutional role that I'm supposed to play. I don't want to go down into history as an IPP who had not chaired her president, one, make some comments on the presidential address. That will not be a good thing for Nigerian Economic Society. And he has listened, called me back after a few minutes, and I want to take up from there. Constitutionally, I'm supposed to discuss his paper, make some few summaries. However, I also know presidential addresses, as we all know, is an address that is unique to the president of Nigerian Economic Society at that particular moment. It is unique because it's an address that does not elicit comments, it's an address that does not require questions, an address that does not solicit input, nor is it an address that will require, for instance, contributions from members. So his words are final. It is supposed to be his day, and I don't want to take that shine away from him. So my coming to this particular podium is to reaffirm the essential need of us to go by protocol, by constitutional means, and then to allow the presidential address to take its natural course. So I will just summarize what our president said this afternoon. And as we all know, we said it doesn't require anything except for me to request for his attention, and we give him the applaud that it demands. That is the recognition that it demands. Having said that, I have looked at presidential address into 4 areas. I looked at the nexus of his own topic. I looked at the objectives of his presentation, methodology he deployed, his key findings, as well as conclusion and recommendations, all in just few minutes. I know the booklet has been circulated, or it will be circulated for members to go through. It's well over 73 pages. So let me take this opportunity to summarize presidential address given by our 44th president of Nigerian Economic Society today at the 66th National Conference of Nigerian Economic Society. His paper or presentation dwelled on Nigeria's growth experience since 1960, lessons learned, mixed opportunities that we were unable to attend to, and then also pathway to transformation. This I want to tie with the theme of this year's conference because there is a nexus. The theme for the 66th Annual Conference of the Nigerian Economic Society, as we have heard it there on all the platforms, rethinking Africans' development pathway to economic transformation and social inclusion in a changing global economic landscape. This, to me, presents a profound and urgent mandate. It calls for a critical re-examination of established paradigms and also courageous search for new sustainable pathways that is linked to our unique challenges as well as opportunities. A lot has been said today since morning. In fact, a lot had been said since yesterday over this particular theme and what it contained. This mandate, perhaps, I think is most pressing for Nigeria, which is what we all know, that it is Africa's most populous nation, and among the 4, for instance, most largest economies on the continent. The presidential paper that has been presented this afternoon offered a direct response to this particular theme, because it's predicated on poignant national question. That is why has Nigeria, despite its immense natural resources, that is both human and natural, endowments, failed to achieve transformative and sustained prosperity. While other economies that he used as comparators, such as Malaysia and Indonesia, have succeeded where we were unable to make the headway. So the paper tried to cascade a lot of issues that is aimed at identifying specific historical inflection points where opportunities were missed. He also tried to extract, for instance, actionable lessons that could be learned and chart a concrete pathway for Nigeria's economic transformation by providing a vital evidence-based contributions to the conference discourse in terms of understanding the African pathway to development. The objectives I was able to summarize here into 5. The paper looked at 5 specific objectives. 1, to critically analyze Nigeria's growth potentials and structural change since 1960, identifying, for instance, periods of progress and periods of non-progress that have been recorded. The paper equally looked at ways of conducting a comparative analysis of Nigeria's socioeconomic performance with that of other countries in Asia, like Indonesia and Malaysia, to pinpoint divergent paths. Number 3, to identify the critical, for instance, juncture where Nigeria's dropped the ball, which he tried to explain, and missed opportunities for transformative growth. He also looked at, for instance, the empirical assessment of the feasibility of the current national ambition of achieving a $1 trillion economy by 2030. And he has also made a lot of points over it. Finally, the paper proposed a strategic policy framework and recommendations to place Nigeria on a sustainable path to achieve economic transformation. What were the methodology deployed? I feel the paper employed multi-pronged approach. Several methodologies were used. There was this historical and descriptive analysis that he adopted to review detailing of Nigerian growth trends, sectoral competition, savings investment, for instance, patterns, and macroeconomic volatility from 1960 to 2023. There was also the comparative case study analysis that was also deployed, where systematic comparison with Indonesia and Malaysia were taken into account to see areas of divergence and convergence, and what leads to the differentials, for instance, in the growth path. There was also growth accounting framework that was also applied, where he also studied and looked at growth decomposition analysis where he attributed growth to factors like capital intensity, labor intensity, for instance, labor productivity, and total factor productivity for the 3 countries in question. And there was simulation modeling that were also deployed in the paper using Harodoma growth model framework to simulate alternative growth, for instance, trajectories for the Nigerian economy. And based on the different savings rate and capital efficiency parameters, the model is also used to critically evaluate the feasibility of the $1 trillion economy in question. There was then also the institutional analysis that were also deployed, where an examination of the structure of economic governance, including the academic and the professional backgrounds of individuals occupying macroeconomic positions, for instance, or economic management positions in Nigeria as compared to these comparado states or countries. What are his findings? The findings have been analyzed as thus. The president made a volatile and unsubstantiated or unsustainable growth as one of his findings, where Nigeria's growth has been highly volatile. He also said it was heavily dependent on oil and has failed to translate into sustained per capita, for instance, income improvement. The economy is less diversified now than it was in the 1970s. There was also the comparative gap. His paper also concluded by looking at the fact that Nigeria's GDP per capita grew 7-fold in 60 years. Malaysia's per capita growth was 12-fold in that period, and Indonesia is about 20-fold. So Malaysia and Indonesia have sustained that growth and led them to middle-income economies, while we are still lagging behind. There was also the productivity deficit that was explained in the paper. Growth decomposition reveals Nigeria's growth had been driven minimally by productivity. Nigeria has the lowest, for instance, total factor productivity growth as compared to the two comparado states that he mentioned. There was also the sectoral underperformance. Nigeria's, for instance, manufacturing sector is weak, and compared to other economies that he looked at, like Malaysia and Indonesia. And for us to achieve productivity and save, for instance, food security, we must look inward again. We must diversify, and we must try to balance this particular gap. There was the issue of human capital, for instance, exodus. We look where he said Nigeria's, for instance, also perform and underinvest in education, in health, and other human capital development indicators. And there is the need for countries like Nigeria to be proactive and invest in that particular sector. There was also weak institutions and governance, where he looked at Nigeria, for instance, suffering from macroeconomic instability, policy discontinuity. He also looked at the issue of corruption and how it affects performance in most economies of this country. There was the economic governance also deficit, where he called for professionals in the field to be engaged in key economic sectors of the Nigerian economy for them to give the desired result. And for the 1 trillion economy target, which is currently, as he pointed out, is unrealistic, and the number of years we have to stay is about 12 to 18 years if we are to grow at even 31% for us to achieve that. And he averred that no country will be able to do that within that short period of time. So conclusively, the paper concludes that Nigeria's growth tragedy is not preordained, but is a result of policy, for instance, failures, weak institutions, and a lack of long-term vision. The lessons from other Asian countries like Indonesia and Malaysia to the president said are clear stresses. They are the success stories that are built on strategic diversification, human capital involvement and investment, macroeconomic discipline, as well as strong institutions. And we need to imbibe that if we want to get to where we are targeting. Then there are also policy recommendations that are also proffered by the paper, which is to mobilize savings and drastically improve the capital efficiency. He also proffered that we should also invest heavily in agriculture and revitalize agricultural revolution. There was also the need to promote export-oriented manufacturing for a country to leapfrog from where it is to where it wants to go to. There is also the need to address inequality between and the have-nots so that there will be a way of moving different strata of the economy forward. Also the need to embrace development planning as a long-term strategy if we want to get out of the woods. And we should not, for instance, encourage stopgap planning methods. There is the need further, as pointed out by the President, to strengthen economic governance, where I emphasize economic sectors should have economists at the top of, at the helm of affairs in order to move the country to the desired level we want, and to prioritize human capital development as a means of getting to where that country will want to be. So having summarized this in just a few minutes, I will want to urge members to allow me ask the President, 44th President of the Nigerian Economic Society, to please rise up while you applaud him when I'm getting down the stairs to go to my corner seat and sit. So please, Mr. President, rise up to get the shine of the day. It's your day, it's your paper, it's your work, and you earn it. Thank you.
Please continue clapping. Continue to clap for the immediate past president of the NES.
Thank you very much. We want to say thank you to all of you for your patience and for being there as we all continue. We're about to move on to our second fire chat for the day, and we still don't have a couple of people, but we'll introduce them as they come forward.
All right. The next items now that we're having, and that would, after that, we would definitely have the conclusion of today's conference. We'll be having dual plenary sessions. The first plenary will be holding here, and the first plenary holding is titled Policy and Governance to Support African Sustainable Development and Economic Development. The chair of this plenary that will hold here is Mr. Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, who is the Deputy Governor, Economic Policy at the Central Bank of Nigeria, but he has asked his Director of Monetary Policy Department, he has asked his Director of Monetary Policy Department, Mr. Victor Obo, whom I believe is here in the room, to chair, and Dr. Victor Obo is also part of that panel, so he will be taking dual roles. So please let us invite, because the first one will be holding here, like I mentioned. The second one will be at the banquet hall. So there are two sessions going simultaneously. So one at the banquet hall, one here. So you have the choice now to attend the one you want to attend. Either you be here or you go to the second one at the banquet hall. The second one, of course, will be looking at, that's the plenary room too, at the banquet hall, we'll be looking at global economic dynamics. So if you are interested to know and to, get more information on the global economic dynamics, the chair of that session would be Professor Nasivi Abdullahi Dama, Commissioner of Internal Affairs at ECOWAS. He will be chairing that session at the banquet hall. So let us just quickly do the introductions.
Yeah, the introductions for the session that is taking place here. We have Dr. Eric Ogunleye, Director, African Development Bank Institute. Is he here with us? Is he here, Dr. Ogunleye? Yeah, so he's coming up, yes, thank you very much. The next is Dr. Victor Ubo. Victor Obo. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So we know they're here with us. Take your seat, and then we have Professor Wale Ogunkola, University of Ibadan. Yes, please come forth. Yeah, for the next session, the other one at the banquet hall with the title Global Economic Dynamics, and has a chair of Professor Nazifi Abdullahi Darma, will be taking place at the banquet hall. And we have their speakers, Honorable Bioma Kamara, Director General, West African Monetary Agency, WAMA, represented by Dr. Elijah Udo. Dr. Elijah Udo. And then we have Ambassador Philbert IKA Johnson, Director and UNIDO, Representative, Sub-Regional Office in Nigeria and ECOWAS. Ambassador Philbert, going the other side. Then we have Yusuf Rekia Okwemi, Director, Payment System Policy, Central Bank of Nigeria. Is she around? She will also be going to the other side. And then the last but not least, my dear good friend, Dr. Baba Musa. Please come and give him a big round of applause. We're sending him to the other banquet hall to be there with them.
Of course, Dr. Baba Musa is the Director General of YFM and the Vice President of Nes. So let him take his colleagues and they go over there and talk about global economic dynamics. I want to assume that those that are standing now are moving over to that area. And please, like I mentioned earlier on, these sessions are going concurrently. And after these sessions will be launched, then we are done for the day. After these sessions launch, we are done for today, not for the annual conference. We are done for today. After this one, the agenda that I have, anyway. Okay, so you all understand what we are doing. I'm talking as a result of what I have here and the information that I was given. So we have concurrent sessions 3. So that means we'll be here till when? We'll be going on concurrently. Yes. All right. So are we good to go, Dr. Obo? Over to you, sir.
It's better now. One hour. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, the President, executives, and distinguished members of the Nigerian Economic Society. Let me start by conveying the apologies of the Deputy Governor of Economic Policy, Dr. Abdullahi Sani, who was here earlier, but had to be recalled for another urgent official assignment. And that is why I'm standing in for him. I'm supposed to be a panelist in this discussion, but I'm not sure my head is too big enough to wear 2 caps. So if I'm able to wear one, I think I may have been saluted. Having said that, I want to welcome distinguished panelist, Prof. Ogunkola, and my good friend, Dr. Eric. You're welcome. We are going to discuss the theme on policy and governance and how these can support African sustainable growth and economic development. By way of introductory remarks, it is important to know that good policy and strong governance system are instrumental to delivering sustainable growth and economic development anywhere in the world. For Africa, statistics are clear. We have all the resources and potentials that should leapfrog us from poverty to prosperity. According to AFDB, Africa accounts for 65% of the world uncultivated arable land, which totals about 874 million hectares of agricultural potential. If you get to the area of GDP growth, we have grown from about $600 billion in 2000 to over $2 trillion in 2024, which again provides some very good statistics for us. This is provided by UNECA. The sorry issue here is that despite this impressive macroeconomic potential, Africa's economy continues to underperform. Today, Africa plays host to over 400 million people living in abject poverty. Youth unemployment exceeds 25% in many African countries. This highlights the critical need to have very strong policies and good governance systems that should be able to deliver services and bring people out of poverty. And so the importance of strong policies, strong institutions, and good governance that should take us out of that abject level of poverty cannot be overstated. It is on this basis that we, without wasting time, we delve into this theme of how good governance, good policy, strong institutions can deliver sustainable economic growth and economic development for the African continent. So with this background, let me hand over the floor to our panelists to make a short presentation or remarks about their own areas that will contribute to this discussion. And thereafter, we'll have some round of questions that will be able to address various issues within the context of the general theme. So let me start with Professor Wale Ogunkola. Professor Wale is of the University of Ibadan, and he is going to provide some initial remarks on strengthening regional integration for economic transformation. Prof, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me also thank the President and the members of Council for the opportunity to speak on this important issue. And this is just to link regional integration to the issue of structural transformation. And the first thing that we need to understand is why do we normally think of regional integration? First, if you look at the story, it's simple. Even if you take the Nigeria economy that we think is very big, it's still very small in terms of global players. Belgium, that is very small in terms of physical size, the economy is bigger than that of Nigeria. So, if we want to optimize, if we want to perform creditably well, we need a larger market. And that started since independence. Again, we recollect the case of ECOWAS formed in 1975. We also recollect the African Economic Community that was done in 1992. And recently, the African Continental Free Trade Area. The whole idea is that we are better integrated and we'll be able to optimize, we will be able to compete, and we'll be able to diversify our economy. So there are many reasons for regional integration. I've just used that one. The cultural aspect is there. Education is also there. But the way we define regional integration in Africa is all-encompassing. Let me correct this notion that regional integration is the same as regional trade agreement. No. Regional trade integration is just an aspect of regional integration. Indeed, thank God that we have AFDB here. Our Pan-African organization developed what we call ARI, Assessing Regional Integration Index in Africa. And there are 5 pillars. Trade integration is one, which we are all familiar with. We also have productive integration. To me, I will put productive integration as number 1, because if you don't produce, what are you going to trade? Then we have the issue of investment integration, the issue of movement of people, which is still a big issue. You remember the case of our brothers in Ghana, chasing Nigerians, which is a paradox, but it's happening. We also talk about macroeconomic integration, the need to reduce inflation in order to attract cross-border investment. These are different aspects of regional integration in Africa. Take it at ECOWAS level, take it at AFCFTA level. These are fundamental pillars here. And you will agree with me that we can link each of them to the pathway to structural transformation. Let's take one of the pathways to structural transformation, which is industrialization. Nowadays, when you talk about industrialization, it is no longer Nigeria producing for West Africa economy, no. It's no longer producing from one input to get to the final input. Indeed, we now trade in tasks rather than in goods. Regional value chains, supply chains, all these are still new to us. But if you must do that also, that's important for me to also raise the issue of trade in services. So it's no longer talking about trade in services. We need to also integrate services into manufacturing, which is still missing. So for structural transformation, you will see that trade integration alone will help us a lot in terms of achieving structural transformation. What of diversification? Again, if you are able to specialize in one area and you are able to trade as far as you can, of course, you'll be able to produce more things than just focusing on one item that you are not competitively advantage. It is important that in all this, what is critical is the infrastructural integration. When I say infrastructural integration, there are two components. The physical part of it, where you'll be talking about road transport, air transport, and so on. But beyond that is what we call soft infrastructure. Nowadays, ICT infrastructure is critical to some of these things. In fact, regionalism and regional value chain, global value chain are based on the development in ICT, development in transportation, where you can produce the brochure here that will be meant for the market somewhere in across the ocean. So people then use this regional integration not only to plan for their own economy, but to plan in terms of the scale of the economy of their production. Can you do this without regular electricity supply? It's no longer possible. Again, the integration is just beyond the physical aspect, but it also contains so many other ones. Free movement of goods, of course, we signed to many agreements in that area, but is it actually happening to us? These are some of the things we need to strengthen when we want regional integration to promote structural transformation. Mr. Moderator, before I stop, I think when we look at the regional integration that we have right now, this is my personal opinion. It occurred to me that we are thinking for the private sector. It would have been the best way for private sector to approach the government in terms of exactly what they need, and for that one to form the basis of our negotiation with our neighbors and so on. For AFCFTA, you will see that we rushed to actually have that agreement. The implementation now is now coming to let the private sector get to know what is in there for them, and also to empower them, to encourage them to explore the market. For us to go forward, we need to engage the organized private sector in so many areas. There is Africa Business Forum, there is a Federation of West African Chambers of Commerce and Industry. I think we need to go back to let them know that they have this opportunity of exploring what we've already negotiated in the regional integration agreement. The other one is listening to previous speakers today. There is need for us to mainstream the regional integration agreement that we signed into national development strategies. My idea is this: if we have the national development strategy, which areas do we want to leverage on the agreement of regional integrations that we have to be able to achieve them? We can still do this, and we can still go back to renegotiation. God so good, there's a clause in AFCFTA for 5-year review of the agreement, and we can still bring some of this to our table. Finally, there is the need for us to achieve policy coherence, not only in the area of monetary and fiscal policy, that one is so obvious, but in terms of exactly what we are trying to achieve. We need to think through and let the policies come together to address an issue, rather than one policy arm saying something and the other one saying another thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Please, you deserve a round of applause. Thank you very much, Prof, for that strong foundation. Let me turn to Dr. Gunleye, and you have 7-8 minutes to make your presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very, very much. People often ask about what is the difference between economic performance in Africa vis-a-vis what you see in some other developed countries. People ask, why do things work in some places and why do they not work in some other places? I think one of the key things that is at the heart of why things work or why they don't work can be summarized in just one word, and that is governance. And I'll add to that leadership. Of course, we know governance, leadership, they go hand in hand. So when we're talking about governance, therefore, we're talking about how power is exercised. We're talking about how decisions are made. We're talking about how institutions work, how they function. So if you have governance where powers are appropriately exercised, decisions are well made, and institutions function well, you tend to see that there's a big difference between the way the economy itself will work. So what that implies is that governance is not just an end in itself, but it is a means to an end, and it's also more importantly an economic imperative. People often say that political economy is more important than economics itself, and that is true. Because political economy, you have a lot of issues that have to do with governance, decisions, how institutions function, and so on and so forth. So the question then is, why should we be thinking about rethinking governance? The reason is because the type of governance that we have currently, especially in most African countries, in most cases, they are often very highly centralized, where you have power concentrated at a certain center, and so they are not devolved. And as you know, the saying is, power corrupts, and absolutely power does what? It corrupts absolutely. So when you have a lot of power concentration, those in whose power that power is concentrated, those in whose hands those powers are concentrated, they tend to abuse the power. Now, the second point is about the fragmentation of power. That may look like a contrast, but what that also suggests is you have some situations also where the power are so devolved that the center or the key decision-making arm becomes weak. And the final thing is the fact that most of the way we use power or governance work in most African countries is simply reactive rather than being proactive. So things happen, then we start to chase how do we correct them, rather than ensuring that we take measures that will ensure those things don't happen in the first place. Insecurity in Nigeria, for example, is a typical case. Were there steps we should have taken at the governance level that ensure we do not get to the state of insecurity? Or should we wait for things to get to where they are now and we're firefighting? So this is the reason why we need to think seriously about rethinking our governance models. Because what these governance models do when they are reactive, when they are fragmented, and when they are centralized is they do not respond effectively to the dynamics of global changes and even domestic changes. Shocks will come. The governance system will make it difficult to respond to them. So what then should we be thinking about? We should be thinking, therefore, about the opposites. How do we ensure that we make governance to be more inclusive? How do we make governance to be more transparent? How do we make governance to be more accountable? And how do we ensure that we rethink governance in such a way that they are results driven? So that should be the focus, the key things we need to look at when it comes to rethinking governance. And I will give just a few examples as I go along, just to demonstrate what people are doing in other places with regard to governance or rethinking governance that is making things to work differently from the way they are in this part. So the question, therefore, is if we want to rethink our governance to make it effective, what should we be thinking about? One thing we need to think about is that we need to ensure that our governance is unified and they are coordinated. A lot has been said already about policy coordination by Professor Ogunkola earlier. Of course, when we're talking about policy coordination, people tend to think about monetary fiscal policy, but it goes beyond that. Remember, we also have layers of government. So you're thinking horizontal, you're also thinking vertical at the same time. How do we ensure that there's policy coherence across the federal, the state, and the local? Are they pursuing the same goals? Are they pursuing the same agenda? These are important points when it comes to that. And Rwanda is a very typical example, success story in this regard. Rwanda had Vision 2020, and now they have just prepared Vision 2050. If you go to Rwanda today, you have Volkswagen. The population is just about 14 million, less than 15 million people. But you have Volkswagen assembly plant manufacturing in that country. It's a landlocked country. Most times you don't connect from Rwanda to any other country. If you go in there, it's like you're going to an end. With a small population, with the fact that it is landlocked, but they are able to attract such investment. How did they make it happen? Because of vision, because of coordination in policy. So it's important, therefore, that we start to think about that. Think about Nigeria, 250 or 30 million people. Think about how many Toyota vehicles does government procure every cycle. We're just talking about government. Now think about individuals at federal level, at the 36th level, in the FCT, yet we cannot attract Toyota to come and establish their plant here in Nigeria. There must be something wrong. While a 14 million population is able to attract Volkswagen to establish their factory there. So policy is the issue. They had the vision. In fact, I spoke with a couple of people in Rwanda. I was there just 2 weeks ago, and they said when the Vision 2020 started, people thought the head of state was just being overly ambitious. That is not going to happen. It cannot work. But it happened. Reason? Because he had the vision. And he could coordinate the governance to ensure that he makes everybody to rally around that vision to make it happen. Of course, we have Vision 2020. I think that's the one I know very well. Most of us are familiar with. I don't know whether we've developed another vision. And if we have developed another vision, to what extent are we coordinated in our approach to make it work? Yes, I see some of my friends from budget and planning here. I used to be there, So where are we with regard to ensuring that proper coordination of the vision that can help us to deliver on this? So that's one point. And again, leadership. Leadership is it. Now the second point is strengthening institutions. Again, institutions do not function by themselves. They are run by people. And if the people who are running those institutions are not good enough, the institutions itself will be weak. So what we need to focus on, therefore, is how do we build strong institutions and not just strong individuals? And I think this point has also been made. When you build those individuals that will strengthen the institutions, how do you not only attract them, but how do you retain them? And I've spoken with a number of colleagues from some institutions, and they keep complaining how institutions have grown really weak, how individuals who work in these institutions are not up to date in terms of capacity and all of those. And I said it's not peculiar to government institutions alone. Even for us who work in global institutions, continental institutions, we've seen a lot of, I'll call it some drop in terms of the quality of the people who work in these institutions. So the question then would be, how do we strengthen the capacity of these individuals so that they can in turn strengthen the capacity of those institutions? Because if the institutions are work, you develop a policy, you have a vision, and you do not have an institution that will drive that vision, it's not going to work. In Rwanda, they have what they call the Rwanda Development Board. It's like the overall, there is virtually nothing. The CEO of that institution reports directly to the president so that he understands his insights, he understands his vision, and can interpret them. So this is the second point institutions have to be worked. Then next to that is transparency and accountability. If institutions or governance is not transparent, if people are not held accountable, if there is no consequence management, there will be challenges. Governance will not work. And again, I'll refer to the example of, Professor Adenekinju earlier spoke eloquently about Malaysia and Singapore, and we have a lot of good examples from these places. In Rwanda, too, we have good cases of people who, because of the fact that they took wrong decisions, whether you're in the military, whether you're in academic, whether you're in public organization, whether you're in private sector, if you're found culpable, you end up in jail. And there are a number of ministers who are there because of the fact that they did the wrong thing. Why? Because the system is transparent. The system holds people accountable. So that is another point we need to bear in mind. Botswana, Mauritius are other examples in the way they manage their resources. Botswana especially, many of us know how endowed they are in diamond, and the fact that they have used that resources transparently. In fact, there was a time they went to borrow from the World Bank, IMF, and the moment the price of diamond increased, they went back and just paid off the loan. This was like a 30, 40-year-old loan. Transparently, they said, we have the resources now, just pay off. So that is the power of transparency. And when people do what is wrong, they must be held accountable. We know the principle of why people break taxes. If the probability of being caught is very low, and the probability that even when you're caught, you will not be punished is also very high, definitely you will not pay tax. People will evade tax. So it's important, therefore, that we hold people accountable. Then governance also needs to be participatory. It has to be bottom up. In most cases, in a number of African countries, the way governance works is you just go to a community and decide for them what they need to develop. You don't give them that choice to make a decision of what they need. So you may end up giving them water when what they really need is education. You may end up giving them road when they really need are hospitals. So it's like, therefore, administering a headache medicine for somebody who is having stomach ache. So it's important, therefore, that we ensure that people are carried along. And they do that a lot in Botswana. You have communities that meet and decide on what the need of the community are, what those needs are, then they build up from there to the national level. So that helps them to ensure that what is needed at every point in time is what is provided. So governance, therefore, is responsive to the need of the people. Maybe one more point to mention is digital transformation. One of the things that is fueling corruption in most African countries where we deal is the fact that there is no digitalization. When things happen manually, then there is high probability that people will cut corners. Cash can miss, and so on and so forth. But when there is digitalization, there is traceability. It helps you to be able to trace resources, to trace people's action. If decisions are to be taken and is digitalized, you know at whose level that decision is lying, who is taking time, who is sitting on it. So digitalization is absolutely important. I know I've spoken for some time. Let me keep quiet for now. I could have another opportunity maybe to profess some policy recommendations and also to speak a little bit about what we're doing at the African Development Bank to support African countries to improve governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Dr. Gunle. Let's return to Professor Gunkola. You mentioned AFCFTA, and it's often tipped as a game changer for the African continent. But there are also other schools of thought that think Nigeria is not ready. Or maybe West Africa joined prematurely. Are we ready? Is it really a game changer? If not, how can we remedy the situation so that we can optimize the opportunity in AFCFTA?
Thank you very much. I think if you ask me this question about a year or two ago, I will say yes. But in the last 1 year, I think the government is ready for AFCFTA. I think it has already gazetted it, and they are already making effort to implement. Remember, it's an agreement, and the way it is designed is also, maybe I can speak about that a little bit. It is work and eat. I hope some of us remember what we do when we are playing football when we are young. For you to be on the goalpost, you must score, then it's your turn. In most of the regional integration agreement, the letters are there. But the implementation, the way you see it, the way you take advantage of what is in the letter is the most important aspect of it. And I think we are making effort to do that. We joined the Guided Trade Initiative. That's about a year or two ago, and we are able to export or trade under the AFCFTA. I also know there is a National Action Committee on AFCFTA. So I will say yes, at government level, we are ready. But the most important point is to get the private sector to see the vision and to catch the vision. It's for somebody who is coming to Nigeria to invest, but rather than see Nigerian market or West African market, to see African market. And then the level of investment will also be big enough to service the market. One thing that I need to also mention is the issue of human capital development and the role of regional integration in structural transformation. Most of the time when you design regional integration agreement, you talk about other factors of production except human resources, or you cash it on the head. And human development is critical, even to trade, but it's more critical to services. Where a teacher in Nigeria can practice in Rwanda can teach in Ethiopia. But that cannot happen right now because there is need for mutual recognition of certificates. There is need for language training and all whatnot. So part of what is there in the AFCFTA, indeed one of the simulations that we did was if we are to face just trade in goods and services and other trade in goods only and other protocol, investment and all whatnot, the gain to the continent will be like two-fifths of what we have been if you include services into it. And that's why services trade agreement is an integrated part of that AFCFTA. The implementation, to me, is what we are lacking. Not only in AFCFTA agreement, even in ECOWAS. The headquarters of ECOWAS is here. There are so many advantages of trading on ECOWAS platform. Are we actually taking advantage of that? In this room, I think we are talking to ourselves, not talking to the practitioner. That's why it is more profitable to discuss some of these issues with business association, with manufacturer association, and for them to raise the constraint that they are facing. And for us to then look at it, and even if you cannot solve it immediately, when the agreement is being revised, again, it will come up. But we need to do more in that area so that people will then see that I can trade with my neighbors, I can trade within Africa, I can do this better than any other one. The constraints are there, but again, using the case of Rwanda that you mentioned, the first shipment of good under AFCFTA was done by the state, Rwandan Air, to Ghana at a rebate transportation cost. There are roles for different stakeholders. There is a role for the public sector, which I think the public sector is doing. There are roles for private sector, which, as far as I know, is not yet at that level. At individual level, you can see that Dangote will stand out in terms of making use of those opportunities to establish industries that will not serve only one country, but different countries in Africa. Equally important is the issue of private-public partnership, especially in the areas of infrastructure. People that have money and are looking for where to invest, but the only thing that they need is guarantee for their investment, and which is ensured in the AFCFTA investment protocol. But if we don't implement them, if we don't start, we will not know whether what is there is adequate or not. So it's still a big issue to get our people to know what is in there and to also empower them to be able to take the advantage. Gone are those days when we talk about countries trading, but now we talk about individuals trading. And what do they need? Market information. If I'm producing cocoa beans, for example, I should be able to add value to it. But where are the markets? Again, government should be able to have a system where I can know where cocoa beans or cocoa powder is required in Africa and also to be able to trade. So there are many things to be done, but when you link them to structural transformation, please, it is important that domestic policies are very, very important, very, very critical. And it is when you get it right at home that you can also look at the regional level to be able to shape the idea. If, for example, your inflation is still as high as 22%, how are you going to attract cross-border investment? These are some of the questions. The last time the Minister of Finance was talking about debt servicing, somebody was talking about financing government using 3% of GDP and so on. People are working lower than that, just to be sure that once they enter into your economy, they can enjoy the prosperity and they can have predictability in terms of what they want to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think he deserves a round of applause. Thank you, Prof. Dr. Bungle, you mentioned the need for coordination between the tiers of government. And you know we operate a specialized federating system here. When you make reference to issues of FAC allocation, where about half of the allocation, monthly allocation, goes to the subnational. And that is an interesting development when you compare our own form of federation with others. The question is, how do you think that coordination can be strengthened in practical terms to enhance positive development outcomes with reference to governance models?
Yeah, thank you. I think the coordination platform already exists, to the best of my knowledge. I'm not very familiar, but I used to be in the aid coordination platform in Nigeria, where there's this, between the federal, the state, and the local government, there's this platform where there's a coordination of policy. I know, for example, there's a strong coordination between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministries of Finance of the different states. I also know that there is also a platform for coordination between the Ministry of Budget and Planning at the federal level and also at the state level. I think what they just need to do is to talk to each other more. The platform is already there. And this is not only peculiar to policy coordination. In the whole of Africa, we're not bereft of policies. We're not bereft of strategies. But the question or the challenge we have is usually, how do we operationalize? How do we implement? You remember I talked earlier about the issue of accountability. I talked about transparency. What we need to do is to ensure that through this platform, there are rules of engagement between the different, tiers of government. And I can give you an example. To the best of my knowledge, especially from the development lending perspective, Nasarawa state government cannot come to the African Development Bank and say they want to borrow. They have to pass through the Ministry of Finance at the federal level. It has to be approved. It has to go to the National Assembly before such borrowing can be considered at all by these borrowers, whether it is the IMF, whether it is the World Bank, whether it is the African Development Bank, or any other development financing for that matter. So I'm just using that to illustrate the fact that we already have the platform in existence. For the revenue mobilization, you have what they call, I think they still call it Joint Tax Board, which is a coordination between the Federal Inland Revenue Service and the different states' revenue services in all the states. So the point is just to what extent do we use this platform? And again, like I said, if powers are not centralized where one arm of government can bully their way through or bulldoze their way through, if there is proper recognition of the authorities and at the different levels, and we respect that, I think it would be a lot easier to get things done. So, platforms exist, but do we make use of it? How can we make better use of it? How do we strengthen the capacity of those institutions that are responsible to ensure that those things that need to be done and are done on time? I think that is what is really needed. Okay. And for us, maybe I should just mention one thing. At the African Development Bank, we try to support this coordination. Like I said, at the local level here, the country office supports the ministry, and even at state level, all the lending, some of the projects that are taking place at the state level, lending to those states pass through the federal level in the first place. And we ensure that the headroom for lending in the entire country, not just only in the states, are properly channeled and coordinated. And for debt sustainability, for example, which is a major governance issue, not only in Nigeria, but in all African countries, we ensure that we do not support only at the national level. We also go to the state level to support institutions. So supporting such institutions at both central and subnational levels help to ensure that that proper coordination takes place.
Thank you very, very much. At this juncture, I want to turn our attention to the floor, the audience, so that you can participate in this discussion. So if you have a question to ask or comment, please, you have the floor. We'll take about 4. So make your comment and question very snappy so that we can accommodate that 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Professor Ndubisi Nwokoma from Lagos. I'll be very brief. I'm not going to give another lecture. I have people that would, so many policemen here who would, I can see one of them. So I think the issue of leadership is something you can't overemphasize. I think we can look at the issue of Asia and Africa. And I think the critical issue is dictators developed Asia. And the dictators also ran down Africa. And the issue of developmental state and all that, and the issue of having benevolent dictators, I think that's an issue that we know that leadership is very critical. Even in Nigeria, we can look at even states that are doing well. A state like Abia State, for example, for 24 years, was among the worst states. But within 2 years, we can see a difference. So leadership, I think the point you've made is very, very clear, and I want to agree with that. But the issue is how do we develop leaders to be able to do this job? Is very critical. Then the other issue is about homogeneity and the structure of governance. Homogeneity. Because there's this strong correlation between homogeneity and the rate of economic growth in many countries. When people have divergent value systems in the society, a place like China, they are largely homogeneous. Korea, they are homogeneous. And if not culturally, even in terms of values, these are very, very important. If you have people who are working at cross purposes in the society, it does not enhance economic growth. Even in Nigeria, you can see people in power. People that are working around them are people that from their cultural group. Another person comes in, another group, they will have the people, and the country can develop, in that. So the structure of governance, to take into account this issue of heterogeneity, if the way you structure it, in the First Republic we had development that is going on because the structure permitted the East to go at their own pace, the West. That take into account the issue of heterogeneity in the society. So that's another point. The last point I want to make is the issue of leakages in the system. Corruption. Leakages. a number of times we have a lot of leakage. And it has been said that the amount of capital outflow from Africa is actually more than the inflow. All these FDIs and so on. So if we're able to stop to block those leakages, so those are issues about leakages, corruption, the structure of governance and the homogeneity, and then the other issue about leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Yes. Yes, please, can you give some slots to the students?
Thank you. Standing on the existing protocol. Also, sorry, sir, I'm not a student, I'm a lecturer. But I'm still a student anyway. Thank you. My name is A.F. Ayeni. I'm from Nigerian Defense Academy. Sir, when you were talking of free trade and international trade, you said for people to come and trade, we need to address inflation. And as a monetarist economy, one of the ways to address inflation is by increasing interest rate to address inflation. When the Minister of Finance was talking the other time, he made mention that inflation rate is very high, but still, it was talking of interest rate is high, but still our inflation rate is still high. So what do you think we can do? What policy can we put in place to reduce inflation and to make free trade agreement work in our country or our continent? Thank you.
Okay, next person. We'll take the floor before the response. Yes, we have two more. So students, we need a student. Are you a student? No. A student lecturer, okay.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Anthony Bisson. I'm a PhD student, Federal University of Lafayette, and also a research associate with the Study for the Economies of Africa, CC. Please, I want to ask with regards the AFCFTA, because I think that's an area of interest. Sir, Prof, when you were speaking, I know you talked about issues of government being ready. I think there was a gap assessment, of which is still ongoing, conducted by the Center for the Study of the Economies of Africa. And then I can tell you for free, Prof, that in real terms, our institutions are not ready. We did an institutional assessment because they are fragmented. We have, in Nigeria particularly, a fragmented system, especially for the protocol on trade and services. For instance, there is no harmonized trade policy, let's say transport policy in Nigeria, and one of the sectors liberalized under the AFCFTA, the protocol on trade and services, is transport services. So they really don't have a policy in existence. And then for Nigerian trade policy itself is still hanging. I remember the last DG of the Nigerian Office for Trade Negotiation, Professor Aga, he was with WTO. He was still struggling to set that out, but we still don't have a national trade policy. How prepared are we then to trade within ourselves, Africa? And then secondly, issue of trade policy harmonization. If you look at the commitment schedule for different countries, ECOWAS particularly, I don't know if there's anyone that works in ECOWAS here, is fragmented. Fragmented in the sense that countries are submitting...
Can round up your question.
Okay, sorry. Okay, then I want to ask, if countries are still going ahead to submit their schedule of commitment under the AFCFTA individually, then what is the role of regional economic communities, which from, I think, inception, were said to be the building blocks of the AFCFTA? Thank you.
Thank you. The last person.
All right, thank you.
Please write your questions and submit.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Oluchi Chibuzo. My question is, in a country with weakened institutions like anti-corruption agencies, judiciaries, and electoral system, what can be the solution? What can we use to drive reform and implementation? Thank you.
Okay, so so sorry for want of time. You know, this clock is staring at my face as if I'm the one that is the target. You know, so we will allow our panelists to respond, and then they will give their closing remarks. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I thank you for the questions. Let me make a correction. I didn't say that for trade we need to reduce inflation and so on. Maybe I can put it like a frame that you will understand. When you talk about regional integration, regional trade agreement, and so on and so forth, we normally think at two levels: static gain and dynamic gain. Static, you don't worry about inflation. You do your business as it is. But for regional integration agreement to lead to sustainable development, to lead to the second round or ripple effect, then you need to deal with inflation. And why? If you do that, that's when you have hope of attracting foreign direct investment. And you must do that consistently for them to see the direction where the economy is going. Right now, the inflation rate is high, but again, let's put it in context. It used to be very close to 40, and it's still coming down. So I believe that very soon it will come to single digit if the policies are still working, the reforms are effective. So dynamic gain from regional integration agreement is core, and it's important whenever you are talking about gains from regional integration. There is a question about AFCFTA, gaps assessment, and so on. Yes, you're right. What I mean at the level of government, not at the different sectoral issues. You did not mention that there is a committee that's actually in charge in terms of action to do this. What we've not seen is actually for them to then coordinate among themselves. Remember I said that maybe Nigeria is not interested in that area. But deliberately, the way it was designed is that a la carte, you can decide to pick area you want in AFCFTA. Let me also point out one thing. AFCFTA is one of the agreements that doesn't explicitly saying how to redistribute gains. Have you noticed that? The reason is that we believe countries should be able to decide which area their gain is going to be. But services, to me, is very important, and I think government should do its homework in terms of taking advantage of services, especially services that has to do with human knowledge and skills. I see no reason why people will have PhD degree and don't have employment. And there are countries where they can use their skills or knowledge. So it's important. You are right. Fred Agard, that's the former director of Nigeria Office of Trade Negotiation, tried his best in terms of bringing some of these together. But a tree can never make a forest. And I also know my people in trade, Federal Minister of Industry, Trade and Development, the issue of trade policy, fragmentation, and so on is also with us. At ECOWAS level, for example, This is the 4th year that we've been trying to have common trade policy of ECOWAS. Not because we don't have the draft. We've called for more than 10 to 11 meetings, and there is no agreement. And without a common trade policy for ECOWAS, we cannot go to international fora to negotiate as an entity. Now, what we did to that common trade policy is to suspend it, hoping that the 3 countries that left ECOWAS will come back. Again, diplomatic moves are going on to ensure that they are back, and then we can pick it up from there and try to cross that hurdle. But the implication for different countries is simple. It implies that they will surrender their trade policy instrument to ECOWAS. And I think from the body language of Nigeria in that negotiation, it's like we are not ready yet.
Thank you, Prof.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. A round of applause for Prof. Okay, can you provide responses to your questions?
Okay, so I have 33 seconds or something. Okay, let me start with Professor Wokoma. Very excellent point you made there. But I'll just give maybe just 1 word, 2 words answer to some of the questions you raised. Of course, I know you know the answers, but they're just rhetorical. The first question he asked, how do we develop leaders? Succession planning. I mean, we know countries like Singapore, like Korea, they already know in advance, 30 years, people who will step into, there are leadership processes you have to follow. If you don't follow it, once you deviate, you can't become a leader. Okay, so I think succession planning is one major answer to that question. Now, the second question on policy coherence, the second question is homogeneity. And I agree, I think mindset change is very important, which is what we don't have. Mindset change, and interestingly, we have a lot of institutions we have created in this country aimed to help us do that. National Orientation Agency, for example, even the National Youth Service Commission, National Youth Service Corps. Those are some of the institutions created that are aimed to help us harmonize, to help us coordinate, to help us have similar thinking about ourselves, about people, about culture, and so on. So I think we need to do more about changing our mindset, and if we can change our mindset, it's a very big thing, it's nebulous, it can also be ambiguous in some cases, but if we can do that, then we can make it happen. And the last point you made about leakages in the system, digitalization, institutional strengthening, those are some of the things some countries have done. Like I said, it makes traceability, you can trace resources. All those billions we're talking about, they pass through the system. They have to pass through some account, some banking system for it to happen. So if we're able to trace it, if we're able to also ensure that there's consequence management when people, engage in such corruption, and we hold them accountable, like I said, in some countries where ministers, generals are in jail because of what they did. People, in some of those countries, if you invite someone to be a minister, you say, sorry, I'm not ready, I'm not interested. That's where they had got to. Because they know that you do anything, you'll be held accountable. And you'll even feel sorry about accepting the responsibility or the appointment than not doing so. Okay, so now the question from, I think that's Chibuzo, where institutions are weak, what do we need to do to strengthen anti-corruption? Well, I will talk from the bank's perspective. What we do from the bank's perspective to strengthen institutions, especially when they are weak, is to do what we call policy-based operations. Policy-based operations are some special lending that we give to countries that allow us to monitor the way they implement reforms, to also, to also supervise how such resources are used. In some of those cases, instead of relying on the institution, we use our own institution, like the procurement system, disbursement system, to ensure that we can checkmate how those resources move, where they move to, and so on and so forth. And we also get to hold them accountable to ensure that they are able to implement some reforms that we feel will help to further strengthen those institutions. I know I have time up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We need to round up because the guy there is giving me a red card, and we have to round up. I want to thank the panelists, Prof. and Dr. Gunleye, so much. Another round of applause for them. And also the audience for your cooperation and very, very fantastic contribution. But before I drop the microphone, it's important to answer someone that is worried about inflation. You will agree that there is a very significant, deceleration that we have recorded. Just as Prof said, we're somewhere hovering around 40, and today we are, around 22. So that shows some improvement. We are on a disinflationary path. And I tell you, the outlook is good. It's good. It's good because one of the major drivers of inflation is exchange rate instability. And you can see the relative stability we have achieved over time. And so many other factors are pointing in the positive direction. So we are going to record further disinflation. And that should be able to address some other issues that we have. We know that our own disinflationary part is somehow, sticky compared to our neighbors, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and the rest of them. But the bank is working so hard to ensure that we return to the single-digit inflation. But moreover, the transition to inflation targeting is something that the bank is working so much hard to achieve, and that we be able to hold both the fiscal and the monetary policies accountable, and that will be able to help us to have a good control on inflation. Somebody asked if this is not a talk shop as ever before, but it all depends on how you go away from here, what you take from here. For me, we have policy managers here that can shape the direction of policy, and they are listening to what we are saying. We have, academicians here whose takeaway, I believe a number of us have taken certain areas that should form the priority of our applied research, which we need. Research that, should be able to connect policy, which we need so much. And I think this is where Nigeria Economic Society is very, very relevant. For students, it's also provide opportunity for areas where you can prioritize your research too, and your projects, and so on and so forth. So in all this, we are leaders in our little corner. And if we do what we are supposed to do, I am sure Nigeria will be better for it. On behalf of my Deputy Governor of Economic Policy, I would like to thank the President and ESCO for giving us the floor to chair this session. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. One.
Then can we do our meeting?
Thank you very much. We've just been having a couple of realignments here and there, but we want to thank you all very much. Our concurrent sessions will commence, and I'm sure all our technical team Yes. They're trying to ensure that they put a record to this date by. Yeah, that's. Yeah. So let's register the presence. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Photographers, are we okay? Thank you very much. Yeah, just for information, I have not gotten the final yes whether our lunch is ready or not, but I'll give that to you. We need to go for lunch, but our concurrent sessions concurrent session room 1, room 2, and room 3 will take place here in this auditorium. Concurrent sessions room 1, 2, and 3 is taking place here. At the banquet hall, we have room 4, 5, and 6. We have boardroom will take 7, and upstairs will take 8. So upstairs 8, boardroom 7, banquet 4, 5, and 6. So please let us do that. I think we could reconvene in the various sessions and have our technical meetings. Meanwhile, we want to thank you all very much for being a wonderful audience and let you know that we'll reconvene duly. Thank you very much. We're going for lunch. Yeah. Yes, we are all going for lunch. It's time for lunch. It's already past. It's time for lunch. Thank you.
Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. who emphasized that development in Africa would come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we're just getting started. Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. who emphasized that development in Africa would come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we're just getting started. Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. who emphasized that development in Africa would come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we're just getting started. Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. Rewan, who emphasized that development in Africa would come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we're just getting started. Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. Rewan, who emphasized that development in Africa would come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we're just getting started. Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. Rewan, who emphasized that development in Africa would come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we're just getting started. Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. Rewan, who emphasized that development in Africa will come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we are just getting started. Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. Rewan, who emphasized that development in Africa will come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we are just getting started. Day one of the Nigerian Economic Society's annual 66th conference was nothing short of remarkable. We kicked off with live concurrent sessions that set the tone for intellectual engagement, followed by a welcome address that reminded us the vital roles that economists play in the development of Africa's economy, not to mention the much anticipated keynote speech by Bismarck J. Rewan, who emphasized that development in Africa will come with not just policies but bold vision and action. But at the heart of the day's proceedings, we had the induction and the fellowship awards, where we celebrated excellence, from distinguished public service and corporate awards to inductions and recognitions of lifetime achievers and the fellows, all whose works and services have stood the test of time and continued economic discourse across the continent. As the sun sets on day one, the stage is rolled out for day two, with the ground opening by the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, followed with fireside chats and plenary sessions that promise to be thought-provoking. This is NES 66, and we are just getting started.